Free your mind.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard. Welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show that sits here every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. at Fairway Hotel, and entrance is always absolutely free to each and every one of you who would like to be part of this debate at Fairway Hotel. We sit here every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. and a recorded version runs on NBS television from 4 to 5 p.m. on Saturday. My name is Andrew Irumbe Katusabe, your speaker, and I'm glad I've been joined here by Professor Dr. William Alenyo, who is an international human rights lawyer. He's a civil rights lawyer, he's a writer, and he's an author. He's a historian. And the other side is Comrade Lesaffre Thomas, who is a journalist by profession, but he's also a teacher. He has been teaching across Africa. As a matter of fact, he has been teaching in South Africa, he has been teaching in Zimbabwe, and right now he's in Uganda. He's a freelance journalist. I'm glad to meet you. And of course, our audience, our physical audience here at Fair Hotel from various universities, I am very happy to see you here. We are discussing 30 years after the genocide in Rwanda. Is Rwanda a success story or an illusion in Africa? 30 years later, when we go back to Rwanda, what do you see? Do you see a success story? Do you see people turning the sad moments into positivity, working together, understanding what had divided them in the previous times, to now use them as a bridge to development? Ladies and gentlemen, it has been 3 decades since the April 1994 Rwandan genocide, when members of the majority Hutu ethnic group killed an estimated 800,000 minority Tutsis. 800,000 minority Tutsis. Mitwaro kinana. Not mitwaro munana, mitwaro kinana. Among the 800,000 people that were killed were the minority Tutsi, the moderate Hutus, and members of the third ethnic group known as the Twa. This has been one of the darkest episodes in world history. A combination of colonial era favoritism towards the Tutsis that angered other groups, a media landscape that was ripe for spreading hate, and the slowness of the international community to respond to the crisis, all contributed to the fueling of the genocide. The killings have continued to reverberate in East Africa, leading to civil wars and ongoing violence in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, call it DRC. But what caused the genocide, ladies and gentlemen? Tensions were already brewing between Hutus and Tutsi before April 1994. The Tutsi, who made up about 8.4% of the population, according to the 1991 census, were believed to be genealogically closer to white Europeans, and are now debunked scientific theories and were favored under Belgian colonialism. The Hutus made up 85% of the population, but they couldn't in practice access education and economic opportunities that the ruling Tutsi could. What's commonly understood from the historians is that the Belgians used the Tutsis as proxies in ruling the country, and that's why they became privileged. Being identified as Tutsi or Hutu before colonialism was fluid and based significantly on class, with wealth Hutus and able to attain an honorary Tutsi title. It was really based on how many cows you had. But the Belgians built up differences between the two and manipulated it. The Tutsis were better off already, and they, of course, used their privilege to improve their lives. In 1932, I wasn't born yet, Belgian colonists further entrenched those differences when they introduced identity cards that included individuals' ethnicity. Identity cards. In 1959, I wasn't born again. As independence movements swept across Africa, the Hutus violently revolted against Belgian colonists and the Tutsi elite. About 120,000 people, primarily the Tutsi, fled the killings and attacks, taking refuge in neighboring countries, and one of them could be Uganda here. A Hutu government came to power after independence in 1962. The new state from onset, however, faced threats from Tutsi refugees who had organized in exile. One group, the Ugandan-based Rwandan Patriotic Front RPF, aimed to seize power and return exiled refugees by launching attacks on civilian and military targets in Rwanda. The RPF was supported by the Ugandan government of Yoweri Museveni and was led mainly by Tutsi commanders, including Rwanda's current president, Paul Kagame. By late 1990, a civil war had broken out between the RPF and the Rwandan government. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, 30 years later, has Rwanda overcome this sad history, and can it be now used as a yardstick to measure positive progress in Africa, or is it still an illusion? Is it now a beacon of hope and peace in Africa, or we still say it is still work in progress?
Right, Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss this topic. Right, Honorable Speaker, the question and topic is 30 years after the genocide. Is Rwanda an African success story or an illusion? What lessons? I have had to add that. What lessons for other genocide going on in Gaza, Darfur, and Ukraine?
What lessons have they learned from the Rwandan experience?
Yes. Right, Honorable Speaker,
that's a good one.
If it is a success story, then it can be learned from and adopted if Rwanda has successfully handled the post-genocide situation. If not, then there are other things that we must learn. Right, Honorable Speaker, in tackling this topic, I need to first define the term genocide. Coming from a legal background, the generic word there is side, which is killing. So homicide is the killing of one man or one person by the other. Genocide is the killing of many people. In particular, many people from a particular race or ethnicity. Genocide is such a serious concern to humanity, such that on the 9th December 1948, all people of the world sat down to pass a convention to outlaw genocide. There is a convention, the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Right, Honorable Speaker, genocide is described in Article 2 thereunder as the killing, harming, or mentally injuring or forcefully transferring any group of people in order to destroy them physically, in whole or in part. And anyone can be punished for causing genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, or direct and public incitement to commit genocide, or even to attempt to create a genocide. Right, Honorable Speaker, what causes genocide? Genocide arises in usually dual or multi-ethnic countries. Like Rwanda, you have the Hutu and the Tutsi. In Zimbabwe, where there was also a genocide in the Matabeleland province, you have the Shona and the Beri. Actually, it is worse in Zimbabwe, because in Zimbabwe there are two tribes. And in Rwanda, at least there are three, the Twa. But in Zimbabwe, you have Shona, the Beri. Gaza, you have the Jews and the Arabs. So in dual ethnic situations, one ethnic group that is in power usually tries to use that political power to oppress, destroy, and eliminate the other ethnic group. And the United Nations has now said genocide begins in a very simple and soft way. Discrimination in economic matters, human rights violation of a particular group of people, and even economic oppression. In Germany, Hitler began by systematically, economically oppressing the Jews before a full-scale killing of the Jews. There were simple things like taxation, simple things like denying Jews businesses. And that's why every country must concern itself when an ethnic group says we are being victimized. The government must consider that matter.
And the world must listen.
And the world must listen, because the United Nations says when violations, economic and social, are not addressed, genocide comes.
Yes.
Like now we have a very simple thing that people think is very far from genocide, but it's not.
Which one is that?
The EFRIS tax system.
EFRIS.
EFRIS. It is taking a direction where a particular ethnic group is saying that collection of tax in our region is so military and is targeting us.
But I think that's general, Professor.
It is not general, and let me develop the point.
Taxes are being collected from every businessman.
Let me develop the point. Because genocide comes with economic operation. If the people in Rwanda say that they have looked at the detail of the 50,000 people paying VAT, and the 50,000 people paying VAT are centrally emphasized in Buganda, and the collection of tax in Buganda is done militarily by soldiers, while other regions have not seen military collection of a particular tax, then it is incumbent upon the nation to look at the 50,000 people paying VAT. Is it truly regionally biased? So if we look at even the simplest thing, then we shall not have genocide.
But Professor, for the case of Uganda, Kampala, Central Region, when you're saying that taxes are militarily collected in Kampala here, it is not affecting one tribe. Because Kampala is an amalgamation of all tribes of Uganda, including people from out of Uganda.
I have told you that where there is an allegation by a particular group of people that we are being targeted, it must be investigated.
Okay. Okay, that's all. Okay.
We have just seen a documentary.
You have made your point.
Yes, we have just seen a documentary whereby during the Habyarimana regime, Tutsi businessmen were restricted to a quota of, what was it? 9%. You can't go beyond. You cannot trade in particular things. You can't import. So, Right Honorable Speaker, let's go back to the question. Okay. So, back in Rwanda, there has been a historic and perpetual discrimination against the Tutsi when Hutus are in power, and against the Hutu
when Tutsi
are in power. There is a misconception that always discrimination is against the Hutu. And there's another misconception that is always against the Tutsi. No. There is a 40-year cycle of violence in Rwanda.
40 years?
40-year cycle of violence.
What do you mean?
Every 40 years in Rwanda, the Tutsi take over or the Hutu take over.
One group takes over the other.
Exactly.
The cycle is 40 years.
The cycle is 40 years.
So Kagame has so far
30 years.
So there is a likelihood of the next 10 years.
The next 10 years, 2034, a likelihood of another genocide. And I'm going to go point by point. 1954, 1st April.
Professor Alenyo.
1954, 1st April. Mark the month and the year.
1954,
1st April. That was the first time there was a genocide in Rwanda. That was the first time the Hutu rose up and attacked the Tutsi, as we've seen. And that is the first time that there was a political change by the king of Rwanda at that time, the Tutsi king Mutware. He conceded to the revolution. and abolished obuhake, which was a slave labor imposed on the Hutu. 40 years later, in the same month of April, 1994, there is a revolution. The Tutsi get to power. Mark it. 40 years in the same month of April.
There is a cycle, change of guards every 40 years in Rwanda.
Yes.
So far, Kagame, who is a Tutsi, has ruled for 30 years.
30 years.
So we are waiting to see 10 years later
to
make 40 years,
whether
where there is going to be that cycle again.
Exactly, which is 2034.
2034.
Mark that year. Because what has been happening, the Hutu get to power, they push up the Tutsi. The Tutsi go in exile, their children study, they attack, take power. And there are clear signs that in 2034, it is very, very likely that the Hutu can overwhelm the government in Kigali. Because their children have also studied, they are out of the country, there are very many in DRC, there are very many in Tanzania.
By the way, Hutu and Tutsi, who are the majority?
85% are Hutu.
And so the minority are leading.
The minority Tutsi are in power.
The majority, 85%, are
out.
watching for the last 30 years.
They are training.
Outside
They
the
have
Rwanda.
rebel groups. And my prediction is that 2034, after the 40-year cycle, if we don't do certain things, there will be definitely another genocide in Rwanda. And you don't need.
So you are predicting so that we start correcting
the issues, because there are Tutsi in power, but the rebel groups of the Hutu are growing in power every day. In DRC Congo, they are growing every day. Their children are also maturing. You know what happened when the Tutsi came to Uganda? They came to Uganda, they started escaping to Uganda from 1954. The maximum number we received was 1959. They came as refugees. They started studying. They started taking roles and positions in the governments in which they were exiled. And after some time, they had the capacity. They had infiltrated the army of Uganda. They had the capacity to liberate themselves. And by the way, mark the 40 years cycle I've told you. Do you know that RPF attacked Rwanda in 1991? For 3 years they kept fighting until the 40 cycle favored them. Exactly, Mark.
So they know the 40-year cycle.
Yes. Why couldn't RPF overwhelm in the 3 years? That cycle. And the Hutu also know it. I tell you, to answer your question, you say 30 years after the genocide. Is it a success story? I say not yet. Until the 40-year cycle is broken. And 40 years, let me tell you, is a generational matter. It's a generational matter. I can even give you an example of our country here. President Museveni came into power in 1986. Not so? Mark the 40-year.
Are you saying it is also the same?
I'm saying, I've told you that 40 is a magical generational what? Change. Generational. Mark the 40 years since Museveni came to power. Then I go back to Rwanda for you. You see that if you look at from 1986, 40 years, it takes us to 2026. Not so? Look around. How many fighting men of the NRA are still alive? Who went to the bush? If you are fearing Uganda, let me take you to the desert where Moses was fighting. The Bible says when they left Egypt, they were going to Jerusalem in Israel. But they spent 40 years in the desert. Have you seen the word 40? Why? Because 40 years is a generational turning. Because the Bible says, until the fighting men of the generation of Moses were over. Do you notice that? Even if you took the youngest person in a fighting group, add there 40, what will be the strength of that person?
Hey, that's why even the Baganda here say, inakuzomo bizibana. Hey, so the days for
so
40.
To tell whether Rwanda,
so in Rwanda and Uganda,
to tell, therefore, whether Rwanda has broken the circle.
Was the 40 years.
Exactly. To tell whether Kagame and Rwanda have broken the circle as a success story, let's wait for the 40 years when the fighting men of that generation are over. Have you seen the similarity? So, Right Honorable Speaker, in my answer to the 40 years, I say, and I've said, we shall wait until the generational tilt is over. However, let us not be prophets of doom. Let us, as Pan-Africanists and intellectuals, debate what can be done. What can be done as Pan-Africanists?
Describe.
Yes, because we cannot sit here and know the 40-year circle and wait for them to mature. What can we do? Number one, for the genocide issue to develop into a success story, the state of Rwanda needs to be dissolved and absorbed within an East African Federation.
EAC.
The East African Community, political federation. Because, as you have seen, even during colonialism, it is a question of the Hutu dominating and killing, and then the Tutsi dominating and killing. In Rwanda, in Burundi, for example, 7 presidents were changing. If it is a Hutu, Tutsi are in problem. Tutsi, Hutu are in problem. So, let us dissolve these 2 countries within an East African Federation with one East African community, politically 1 president, 1 nation, and 1 army. And that army can never be a Tutsi army, can never be a Hutu army. That army will be an East African army, and their portion will be small. Not so? We also have a situation in South Sudan where the Dinka and the Nuer have become another Hutu and Tutsi. What do we do? Dissolve that state, South African state, South Sudan state, and dissolve their army into a bigger East African army, where you can never trace the Dinka, you can never trace the Nuer, you can never trace the Tutsi, you can never trace the Hutu, because all the East African countries,
you simply trace a nation.
You simply trace a nation. If that is not done, the 40-year circle is coming. It will overwhelm Kagame because he will be an old man 10 years from now. You see, when the war was going on in Burundi and Rwanda, they proposed the 2-state solution. You know, Rwanda and Burundi were one nation. It was called Rwanda, Urundi. Actually, Rwanda, not with W, but U.
Rwanda, Burundi.
Rwanda, Burundi. It was one country. They proposed a 2-state what? Solution. That give Rwanda, Burundi to Hutu, give Rwanda to Tutsi. Proposed by the United Nations. Just like now they are proposing that give Hamas West Bank, make a country, give Israel East Bank. But it's a big problem. When you read even in the 2 holy books, if you read the 2 holy books, that genocide cannot be ended. It cannot be ended because the Holy Quran has a story of how the Jews came to the land. The Bible has a story of how Jews came to the land.
Who came there first? How do you split Jerusalem? The Bible and the Torah says this is one city you can never divide. So when you see some say, hey, East Jerusalem can become headquarters of Hamas and another state, Right Honorable Speaker, that is a lie. Like saying that Burundi can be given to Tutsi, Rwanda to Hutu. Because what will be the border? The border will be a permanent place of conflict. We have it in South Korea. We have it in North Korea. Permanent, that two states, but it's a permanent war zone. And the British, who are fond of creating this problem, have not learned a lesson. They created also a two-state solution in India, between India and Pakistan. When they were giving independence to those countries, they said, let's create a two-state solution. Give India one state of the Hindu, give Pakistan another state for the Muslims. But there is a permanent war between the two. Actually, they even have nuclear weapons. So, solution for Rwanda, dissolve that country into East African community. Before they want to catch up.
Burundi, one country.
Rwanda and Burundi, one country, and then one East African country. By the way, I've always said here, I don't even know what Museveni and Kagame are doing. These people are friends. They should seize the chance to unite the countries, unite Rwanda, Uganda into one, and East African Federation.
Africa.
They will be in exile one time somewhere, and they will regret why they never united.
You're threatening these old people.
I am speaking on a microphone.
Professor, stop threatening president.
I have said the presidents of Rwanda and Uganda, they are one people. They should take the chance to quicken and fasten the East African Federation for the good of the Rwandese people, for the good of Ugandans, and for avoiding a sure genocide in the next 10 years because of the 40-year cycle. I end here.
Free your mind.
Thank you. Someone had a question? They told me. Okay, you ask.
Basically, what you've discussed, if you look at the things before the genocide, there were similar things that again are still happening. You can't tell me Rwanda is a success, yet I cannot have that freedom to express what I want. That's freedom for speech. You cannot blind me because the infrastructures are good and they are telling us Rwanda is like half London, but I'm oppressed in my country. So, we see...
Have you met any Rwandese and he has told you he's oppressed in his country and he cannot speak?
Of course, even Rwandese come from Rwanda to Uganda to look for a better life. That's the mere fact. But now, Rwanda is the one that conflicts with its neighbors. We recently had a border conflict with Rwanda, Uganda and Rwanda. It has a conflict with DRC. So, and even Burundi. Now, you find that the issue of where now people should go is also becoming a problem. And these signs that fightings are always there, the signs show that the genocide is also going to come back. History, remember, history repeats itself. They are showing. Whereby people are becoming annoyed now, they have to go against the government.
Thank you, Professor. So I have a question. Sir, you talked about the cycle when you talked about the Wuhaki abolition in 1954. By definition, a cycle is a series of events that are regularly repeated in the same order. But so we cannot predict that in April 2034 or in 2034 there was something that will be, because it only occurred once. For a cycle to be a cycle, it has to be a series of events. That happened only once, from 54 to 94. So could you please enlighten us on what makes it a cycle, because it only happens once?
You want to disqualify it as a cycle?
A cycle,
it's
yes.
not a cycle.
Yes.
You want it? It's okay.
If you can clarify
Let
that.
him finish. I will give you the mic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the presentation. But sometimes we get to ask, all these that we are going through, the changes, the cycle as you termed it, don't we think that Africa has been misled to adopt something that is not African per se? all the issues we have across the continent have something in common. There is an interested hand behind. We are more or less used that as pawns to fulfill a certain agenda by someone somewhere else who is not on the chessboard. It's like we're playing a game and someone is busy moving the pawns wherever they want. So don't we think, Mr. Professor, don't you think we need to get definitions of maybe things like simple terms per se, like democracy? We are relying on a definition given to us by someone who we don't know. Does it apply in Africa? Is it applicable in Africa? Two, don't we need an African leadership model? The French, in days of history, had the leadership of the kings and the likes. They themselves determined it unfit. They changed it by themselves. In Africa, we are struggling between having kings and having presidents. Question is it applicable? Was Africa ready for this model of leadership? Is it even relevant now? I beg to submit.
So, what I wanted to inquire about is the same as the colleague has said of the cycle that Rwanda has been going through phases of 40 years. But let's understand that Rwanda is not formed in 1954, like Professor said when it started. Rwanda is formed in 1962. So, prior from 1962 and 1954, there were other years. So you cannot predetermine that in the 40 years there's always a genocide happening. And the other thing that maybe I wanted the professor to talk about is, you see, we are talking about 30 years after the genocide, but we have not even answered the question of the genocide. How is genocide formed? The people here, if you would ask the people, have they understood how does genocide come into existence? There are certain phases that genocide comes into existence. And these ones have been profoundly by various scholars. There are quite 7. I'm going to mention them. Maybe the professor can add on. The first one, they say it is classification. You classify people. This is a Hutu, this is a Tutsi.
Categorizing people.
Yes, absolutely. Either ethnicity or religion. So the other second one, it is called symbolization. Now, in symbolization, the target group is assigned symbols or labels. Now, if you're to go in the context of Rwanda, people were measuring their nose, people are measuring their cheeks, how they are in the height, stuff like that. Are they happening in Rwanda now? No, they are not happening. So you cannot say predetermine that it's going to happen in 40 years. The next one is called dehumanization. The targeted group is purportedly reported as less people. You see how they were calling the Tutsi Inyenzi, like Inyenzi is like a cockroach.
Oh.
And yes, are these things happening in Rwanda now? Absolutely no. So you cannot tell me that in 40 years there's going to be another genocide. Let me give you another one. It's called organization. Organization, this is where the genocide is often organized and mobilized. Is President Kagame currently organizing a genocide against the Tutsi?
The answer is no.
No, the answer is no.
The answer is no.
Yes.
It's a big no.
Yes, absolutely.
The answer is a big no.
The fifth one is called... They are not organizing as well. We cannot clarify say that they are organizing.
He's coming to answer.
Yes.
The question is Kagame organizing a genocide
against the Hutu?
The answer is no. Now Professor Alenyo is also asking you,
yes,
are the Hutus organizing? Because you may not organize to attack me, but I may organize to attack you.
Absolutely.
That will also cause a genocide. So he's
absolutely. And what we are speaking of is, let me first give the stages. The fifth one is called polarization. Now, here the extremist ideologies are reinforced and moderate voices are silenced or marginalized. This creates an environment of fear and distrust where individuals are pressured to take sides and support the genocidal agenda. And is there polarization currently in Rwanda or in places around Rwanda? Let's say Uganda or Congo. Are they happening? Are they evaporating? Can they be seen? Can you give us critical evidence, or it is just hearsay and talk? Then the sixth one is called preparation. Plans are made for systematic extermination or expulsion of the target group. Can we say that, let's say, if we presume that the Hutus are planning, do you have concrete evidence that the people who, let's say, they're saying in Congo, like this M23 saga that is going on, can you say that, or can you give us
FDR or something?
FDR, yes, which is a rebel group that was espoused from Rwanda in 1994. Can you say that they indeed they have plans, systematic plans. They have backup already that they have to come back to Rwanda and exterminate the Tutsi.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
The last one is denial.
Okay.
Yes. Here, after the genocide has occurred, perpetrators may attempt to deny or minimize the role of atrocities. There are people who denied Kanova Gosora, Rusesabagina, all of them. Recently there was even a tribunal on Rusesabagina. They were denying that they didn't get involved. But there was critical evidence that these people indeed were involved. And it is true that sometimes even people today are still living in denial that they didn't do. But we remember the International Criminal Tribunal that happened in 1954, where the United Nations said they must come and solve this issue, and they didn't even solve it. It is only the Gacaca courts that the Rwandans themselves made up and dissolved this issue with issues of truth and justice and reconciliation. It was only the Gacaca courts, just like the Matoput courts, that they were able to solve these issues of genocide that was happening in Rwanda.
Thank you so
Irumbe Katusabe.
I want to talk about SACCO. I tell you, my brother, I made a clarification. I said there is a predictable cycle of violence. Now, I want to take you 40 years. I started with 1954. I didn't say Rwanda was formed then. No. Actually, in my research, I even researched about the ancient kingdoms. Now, I'm just going to do you one thing. Go 40 years from 1954. What is the year? 1914. Are you aware that that is when there was a change? When the Belgian territories changed. That is when West Nile, Mr. Chairman, that's when West Nile became part of Uganda. That's when the Belgian king died. That's when the Belgians struck an alliance with the Tutsi king, actually, Mutwari. There was violence. So am I not right? I'm right. I've done research. I am talking about a circle where every 40 years there is trouble in the country. Whether it's going to be a Hutu revolution or a Tutsi revolution, I've told you, there is a circle of 40 years of violence, and I've defended myself. I can even go another 40 years for you. Now, let me go to another person. Let me go to the second person. Democracy. My friend, where is the person who asked for about democracy? It is true, we need to redefine democracy. But there should be no blindly saying the African democracy or the African cultural systems work. In Africa here, our kings were tyrants. Have you not read in your history that some kings were tyrants? Even in Uganda here, actually there was a king who was such a tyrant that when he started at least to negotiate, then they called him Mutesa, Katasobola Kutesa. The African kings were so brutal, killers. There was no democracy. They were even bundling other Africans and selling to slave trade. So, and even accountability, economic accountability in Uganda.
Actually, some of them benefited from that slave trade by getting hundreds of square miles of land.
Exactly.
In exchange for human beings.
Even in economic terms, in Uganda here they say Ensawo ya Kabaka tetu nolowamu, which means the Kabaka was free to spend the money without query. So what we need to do in Africa is to have a renaissance, to balance between democracy and African values and even theocracy. Because democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And it is dictatorial. Because if a certain group of people are dominating state power, are they not people?
They are people.
And is it not their government?
It is their government.
So the question to democracy is who? Which people? You can't say democracy is the government for the people, by the people, therefore it is good. No. Unless you are part of the people in the government. So, democracy, you're giving people chance to exploit. Now, let me go to the fourth person. And my brother, I want you to be very careful. And we go through these points. You see, we are not Rwandese, but we love the Rwandan people. We want them to be fair and honest with themselves as they analyze these things. Otherwise, we are going to into demagogy, whereby people are just clever-mouthed. Classification.
Clever-mouthed.
People are just being clever mouth. Look at classification. That one, symbolization, dehumanization. Other people are lesser people. Yes, we must be careful about that. Other people are lesser people. Not only that, but the state in the power, the government in power must also make sure that, you see, other people are not made lesser. You know, you can talk that, you know, it's bad to make people less human, but you are making certain people less human by your economic policies. Are you seeing? Must be careful. As a president of a country, to stop genocide in your country, concern yourself with which part of your country is getting richer than the other. Make every part get equally rich. Because if one part is richer than the other, you have made the other poor part less
What
human.
if the other part is lazy than the other?
There is no such a
Force
thing.
them to work.
There is no such a thing as a lazy person. You would see it from the university. Because in the university we have all tribes. Do you ever see that any tribe is lazy? That is the beginning of genocide. It is like in the 60s they used to say, the Northerners used to say, army is ours because the Westerners are weak. But have you seen, Westerners have been in power for 40 years in the army. Have you ever heard that a gun has fallen from a Nyankole because the Nyankole are weak? Or the Rwandese? No, those are prejudices. The third thing he said, this is very important. Organization.
You may not go through all
I
of
tell
them.
you, my brother.
You have 7 points.
Yes. Organization. My brother, let us not hide our heads in the sand. Those people who committed genocide in Rwanda, they're not sleeping. If the Tutsi think that the Hutu ran to DRC are sleeping, they are not. They are training daily. They are organizing. If you didn't know, Hutu are organizing. So you can't say, they are not organized. Actually, let the Tutsi don't think they monopolize the brain of organization. That, you know, the Tutsi Hutu can never organize. No, they are organizing and we must stop it. We must stop them as United Nations. We must stop them.
And the other advantage they have is that they are the majority, 85%.
You see, they are still
And
planning.
having the majority out of power,
They are still planning to kill. They are still planning to kill, by the way, I'm telling you. The Baganda say, Amaziga kurukutaga kurukutira. If they have ever killed it, and they are there, they will kill again. We must not take this matter jokingly. We must, as East Africans, very quickly have one East African army. Go to DRC and see the people, the Hutu, those people kill. What are you doing? What is this? Are you doing something? So, my brother, today, we should examine our hearts very, very seriously. The 30 years are not enough. Those people are not sleeping. Come the 40 years magic. If we don't have East African Federation, we have a problem.
okay, the last point.
Denial. You see, denial is being misunderstood. It is not about just saying, the Hutu saying we never killed. Because the Hutu killed. And when they say we never killed, you know, there was someone. You see, that is inhuman. They killed. And they have the capacity to kill again. Now, also, the people in the government, to say the Kagame is in power, that thing passed, nothing can never happen. That's also another denial. We should not be encouraged. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Professor
Sabe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. Where do we start? Where do we start? Well, you can start by saying that where does the question come from? The question comes from the big differentiation that you have when you're outside of Rwanda and when you're inside Rwanda. When you're inside of Rwanda, what you hear of Rwanda is that this is the success story. 10% GDP growth, amazing 30 years of governance, the most solid governance, little corruption in the country. That's what you hear from outside. So when I was in South Africa, I used to obviously lecture about the genocide and the history of the genocide, because what's interesting here is also where does it come from. Definitely as a point to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And obviously we presented Kagame as the one that stopped the genocide, which was some of the arguments outside of Rwanda. And this argument saying that the man stopped the genocide, so therefore we should give him full power for whatever he does want to do, is a really problematic argument. And what I realized later on is that it's been shaped by international media. And when international media all agree on one thing about Africa, we should all really be careful. We should double check, triple check what is exactly happening here, because usually the West do not praise the good leadership. They choose the leadership that are weaker. So why is it that they praise Kagame so much, and what come from this? And then I had the chance to arrive and land in Uganda. And when I landed in Uganda, obviously after less than 2 months, I came to Rwanda. I visited Rwanda and I was really shocked. I was really shocked because that was not the story that I've been sold from outside of Rwanda. I was really shocked to see that there is all those roads and infrastructure for sure. Beautiful, beautiful. But there's also no street sellers. There's also no mama selling you bananas or mangoes like you find in Dakar, Johannesburg, Cape Town, everywhere
Kampala.
on the continent.
Don't forget Kampala.
And Kampala for sure. No one is here selling you avocado. No one is here selling you carrots or things like this in the streets. So where are the informal traders? What happened to them? Was my first questions. Then I start to realize that if you just go inside the tour, it looks like you are in Disneyland. Disneyland is fantastic. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to go. It's all fake, 100% fake. Fake characters, fake buildings, everything's fake. And it feels that way when you start to go outside of the road. You start to go outside of the road and what you see is a totally different countries. And those are images that you don't see in the media. You see in the media, if you type Rwanda right now on Google, you're gonna see the convention centers, you're gonna see the beautiful roads, and they are there. They do exist. There is that quietness in Kigali, there is those infrastructures. But where are the people and what are the people feeling and how do they experience the governance of the last 30 years? That was one of my main questions. So is Rwanda a success story that the international media are telling us?
So you have been in Uganda here.
Yes.
You went to Rwanda.
Correct.
What is the truth that you found on Rwanda?
So what is
on
it?
The ground?
Is it a Disneyland?
Yes, you saw the good infrastructure, you saw the good systems. It may even be less corrupt than Uganda. But then I want you to give me the feel of a person, a Rwandese.
It's a complicated question, and I want to answer in 5 points. So it is absolutely, at the first point, a victory. And especially with the same argument that my colleagues have bring, the cycle argument. However, I see a cycle of 30 years and not a cycle of 40 years, because 1954, there is massacres. First massacres organized under the Belgian government, thanks to 10 years after, it comes 10 years after they introduced the ID system where everyone is Hutu and Tutsi, and when a lot of colonial rights come with it, as you explained in your introductions. In 1959, before independence, there's massacres happening. In 1963, after independence, the first massacre happened. If I'm not mistaken, that's the one that led Kagame's mother to move to Uganda. In 1972, 1973, during the revolution years, there is also massacre. In 1994, there is the genocide. And so what my argument is to say, if there were in 1963 massacres, and there were in 1994 a genocide, what we see is a cycle of 30 years. And what we observe as we speak, in 2024, is the first time on 30 years that there were no massacres in Rwanda. I mark the point in Rwanda because this is really important. So for this is a success. It is a success because Kagame and his regime of the FPR have managed a Rwanda that do not try to kill himself. So this is a success, I believe, for every Pan-Africans, for Rwandans themselves, right? However, we do not forget the million of deaths in DRC. And I will get back to that. But my first answer is that it is a victory simply because Rwandans are not killing themselves like their politician used to tell them to do, right? So that's definitely a first point of a victory, because 30 years without massacre in Rwanda is a victory, whatever we like Kagame or not.
Oh, okay.
But we not forget DRC. We do not forget DRC. Early in the reconstruction, Kagame and the FPR have had to resize control over empty country. The Hutu power left in DRC with absolutely everything. The banks not the printers of the banknotes, the pens and the computers, every single part of the state was taken away. The whole economy was based in the hand of those that left. So in 1994, at the end of the genocide, the country is to be rebuilt, and those that have built it are on another country. So what Kagame decided to do? He did something revolutionary, and that's where I want our analysis to point. I want our analysis to point at how did he rebuild this country? He rebuilt this country with a company that almost no one spoke about, but that is in control of all Rwanda as we speak, and not of only Rwanda. The company is called Crystal. I'm sure my Rwandese in the room knows about them. Crystal. What is Crystal? Crystal, when you do the political economy of Crystal, what you realize is that this is the FPR, people that have to rebuild their country. In 1994, they have to find ways to rebuild Rwanda with themselves because they couldn't trust the Hutu businessmen that were there before, because the very same businessmen have paid and introduced money within the genocide machine. So they are here to rebuild the country, and they start from the scratch, and they create that company called Crystal, and slowly but surely Crystal invests in roads, Crystal invests into making juice, Crystal invests into making pens, Crystal invests into so many things.
But
that
who
it becomes
are the
central.
owners of this Crystal?
The FPR, the government. So those are the generals and the leaders of the army that seized back Rwanda in 1994. The inner circle around Kagame. But those are people that answer to Kagame directly. Political economy of this company will tell you that this company have invested in too many things. Security is one of them, production is another one, infrastructure is a third one. And so why is it that we have to look at this company? We have to look at this company because many people in the beginning of the 2000s start to say, this is the model of African development. We need a national company that acts under private law and private capitalist law. He goes around, he makes money, and then the money goes back inside the original country. So that used to be a model that even myself, I remember in university trying to understand how does that company function so well. How does an African company owned by people that were outside of their country for 30 years can be so successful? What's happening here? And so when we look at this company, what we see is that exactly what I explained last week, and I'm so happy my brother right here in the audience quote the national bourgeoisie. At some point, they become the new national bourgeoisie. They seize every single economic opportunity within the country, meaning that Rwanda becomes too small for them. And once again, if you remember last week's show, we will say, what's happening when the national bourgeoisie is in control of too much? That's the phase of imperialism. That's the phase of imperialism. And which imperialism do we observe now? The very same company, Crystal, now is a stronghold in 3 countries, Central Africa, Mozambique, and Benin. Why is it like this? What's happening? What's happening is that after they rebuild Rwanda, and that they seize every single opportunity, they realize there's no more opportunity, no more money to make. And the bourgeoisie cannot accept that they have to chill. As I explained last week, we're not going to re-enter in the details, but they had to extend. They extended. And how did they extend it? They extended first in the DRC, taking the minerals, taking the wood, taking all the minerals, bringing them back to the country, selling it under this very same company. That is a private entity that, no one really knows who's supposed to be behind it. They start to sell resources of DRC, which is an imperialist move. And when they finish with DRC, and by many ways they haven't finished, they start to move in other conflict of Africa. They start to go where the South African fails. They have a thing with South Africans really, it's a long story. One day I hope we can do a show about where it's come from, but they have the things. And South Africans, they were in Bangui, they were in Central Africa. They were trying to catch back opportunity. It was Jacob Zuma, the previous president. He sent the army, so he protected the president, hoping that the president will open him a new contract for mining, right? They failed. The South African failed. The South African army failed. And who came to rescue the president? The Rwandese. And Mr. Kagame himself, okay, not himself, but his army went to protect the president. And what did they do? They won. They won. They protected the seat. And so what happened is that now they start negotiating, because they established the peace. They start negotiating contracts, left and right. And Rwanda Airline, look at where Rwanda Airline opened in Africa, because all the time this is a sign of a step of imperialism.
Rwanda Air.
Rwanda Air, they opened Kigali, Bangui. Twice a week. Twice a week there's businessmen from Rwanda, from Crystal, and other companies that come to Bangui to try to establish businesses. They establish a factory of juice, for instance, they're producing juice. They do business like usual, except that there are 200,000 men on the ground doing whatever they, I'm not going to say it, but whatever they want.
Mutatina, you are fearing. I'm going to withdraw that name.
Doing whatever the fuck they want in Bangui. That's what I was about to say. I wanted to stay polite. But the point is that they're not deployed by the African Union, they're not deployed by the United Nations, they're not deployed by the East African community, they deploy by themselves. And they protect the interests of a growing national bourgeoisie that work under Crystal, the company. So going back to this idea of is that a success or is that an illusion? This company is growing, the GDP is growing. But I want to put a perspective, last number, 45%. 45%. This is the poverty rate of Rwanda.
35%.
45% of people live under poverty line.
No, did you say 35?
45. 45.
45%.
Live under the poverty rate. But yes, during the 30 years we hear about like success, success, and success. Did it took 30 years for the Communist Party of China to almost end poverty? No. No. It took them less than that. So
yeah, but also look at the GDP of China and the population.
Definitely what we can see is that
China
the national
is,
bourgeoisie,
1 billion people.
we can observe that the national bourgeoisie is growing faster.
And even in terms of real space, Rwanda is a small.
Why does the national bourgeoisie grow faster than the middle class? Why does Rwandans have to leave their country still to find some opportunities when some people are making a lot of money? And they're not making a lot of money in Rwanda. Remember, now we are in Central Africa. I want to continue my point. Where did they go after? Mozambique, thank you, sir. They went to Mozambique. By the way, European Union is paying for that mission, just so you know. Exactly replacing who? The South Africans. The South Africans have a stronghold in Mozambique. The South African businessmen have a stronghold in Mozambique. That dates back from apartheid years. It's been a long time. The South Africans are in Mozambique, first as freedom fighters, then as business partners. Who is coming to take their sides? The Rwandese. They come first with the army. They come to defend the interest of the government, right? The government was defending which interest? The government was defending the interest of French capitalists, national bourgeoisie, the very same one I've told you before, Total. Total is developing a gigantic project that the government want to develop because they want the money. That gigantic
from
project,
France.
Total is a multinational company. It's the national.
Yeah, headquartered from France. It's a French company.
But shareholders are from worldwide. So Total French company, French imperialist company, arrived in Mozambique protected by the Rwandans and the government of Mozambique. And what's happened after that? South African leaves, SADC leaves, and now it's only the Rwandans and the government. And what's happening? They open Rwandan airline, Maputo,
Rwandan Air.
and then the businessmen arrive, and the businessman goes and tells the president, listen, you need security. You petrol project, Total, you need security. Oh, you need also like those business and those business and those business. Oh, you are going to open a new mine, we are there. You are going to open a new factory, we are there.
We are there.
So they seize opportunity in Mozambique and develop their ties, right? If the French did the same thing, we would call it imperialism. If the Russians did the same thing, we would call it imperialism. But because it's Rwandans, we're not so sure. We're a bit like, yeah.
The country is developing.
Thanks to Irumbe, he has invited Mutatina, who doesn't fear speaking the truth. So exactly like the French and the Russians said, Kagame and his clique are acting the same way. So what they do is really interesting. The success story of Rwanda, and why is it, getting back to my initial question, why is Rwanda so pleased in Western media? Why does everyone love to say Kagame is the guy that saved the country and now is an amazing African leader? Why does everyone like that? Because they protect imperialist interests in Africa. And as we speak, the army of Rwanda is not only busy in DRC, fighting a really complex conflict that we have already explained here. It's also busy fighting to protect the interests of gigantic multinationals such as Total in Mozambique. And what does it tell us? It tells us that when a country the national bourgeoisie align its interests with the interests of other national bourgeoisie, they become imperialistic. They become imperialistic, and the imperialism line is clear. EU is funding Rwandans. Rwandans protect the interest of the government and are contracted by Total to protect the interest of Total. So at the end of the day, it's EU money protecting Total exploitation of gas and petrol in Mozambique. There is this alignment that imperialists do all the time, which is to align security with business. They call security, but the security is really to maintain the poor. Make sure that the poor don't complain. That's what they call security, really is nothing else. It's nothing else. Why is ISIS growing so fast? Why are the radical thought growing so fast in those regions? If not because they are poor at the first point, because the government made them poor and put them in poverty while the national bourgeoisie keep growing and growing and growing. There will be 65% more millionaires in Rwanda, in Uganda. There will be much more billionaires. We will speak about that really soon in the Pan-African Pyramid, but basically the African millionaires are set to grow, and they will grow especially in countries when they seize those type of opportunity, aligning security and business together, stabilizing a situation so they can take the money back home in Kigali. Then I want to say that there is this form of new economic policy. It is developing, as I said, Central Africa, Mozambique, Benin as well, in West Africa. So those are really tactical countries. One is in Central Africa, the other one in the West, the other one in the Southern Africa, and they do it not for the interest of their people, because they did it for the interest of the people. There would be less poverty in Rwanda as we speak, because Rwanda has amazing growth, and that growth didn't lead to strong poverty reduction rate. I believe that, to conclude, I believe that Rwanda,
Because conclude you must.
Rwanda has copy and paste the success of European imperialists of 20th century to try to redeploy it themselves in 21st century.
Rwanda is using copy and paste. The system of the imperialists is what Rwanda deployed 30 years ago?
Correct. They are copy and paste imperialists. They're doing the same strategy. There's no nullity here. The only nullity is that those are Rwandans and not French or Belgians or Russians or Americans or Chinese. However, imperialism is the enemy of every single African. Not just the national bourgeoisie, everyone in the country. And therefore I believe that for us Pan-African, we have to speak the truth and call imperialism out of the continent. The same way we will call the French interest out of the continent or the Russian one, we have to call out Rwandan interest outside of those countries. We believe in fair relationship. We believe that they need protection and security for sure, but that don't have to take it from other countries. Thank you very much.
So great topic. So Rwanda, is it a success story or an illusion?
Yeah.
I've been to Rwanda personally, Kigali. I think that was last year. I was there to 1 or 2 weeks. No, 2 weeks actually. I was there. So I didn't penetrate much into Rwanda, but a few places actually I saw in Kigali. When it time of coming back to Kampala, I felt bad. I felt like maybe they are throwing me into a dungeon. When I looked at the bit of organization in Kigali and comparing to that in Kampala.
You felt bad?
Yes, I felt bad, but I was coming back home to Uganda. Yeah, so maybe if you compare it with some, probably you could say it's a success story. Yeah, because Rwanda was a bit more organized, But when you go deep, maybe in the village, so there you find that probably.
I'm told that in Rwanda you don't own land as an individual. Land belongs to government. Here in Uganda, you can own your land and even take government to court if they enforce on your land. If government wants to pass a power line in your land, they pay you the money that you agree on. So, how is it in Rwanda?
You see, things in Rwanda are so hot.
Hot?
Hot. That country is small, but my friend, it's hot. You are even going to see, like for example, let me use Kigali. There are some places where poor people are not allowed to stay. Not like here in Uganda. In Kololo, you even find a poor person staying there.
Yeah. In
Rwanda, there are cities where rich people are only found there. and a poor person staying there is like a crime.
You're not allowed.
You're not. And
Or it is your money that is disqualifying you.
That's why you see.
No, if I own my plot of land in the city where the rich men are they going to grab? But anyway, I'm told you don't own land in Rwanda.
Of course. So some things in Rwanda are oppressing people.
Maybe to comment on what you say, it is not entirely true that in the constitution of Rwanda, you're not allowed to own land. People own land.
In Rwanda?
Yes, people do own land. And going back to what he's saying, it is entirely false to say that in Rwanda you are not allowed to go in certain places. I have been in Rwanda as well. There is no entire place in Kigali that is saying, be it the best places you can speak of, be it Kachiru, be it Nyarutarama, be it Remera, be it anywhere. There is nowhere that whereby by the looks of you, they will say you're not supposed to go there. There is no policy in Rwanda because we should be speaking of. Absolutely, even if it is living. You live in a place, you can't live in Kororo when you are earning 200,000. You live in Kororo because you earn 1 million shillings and above. What we should be speaking about, moderator, is it is policy matters. Is there a policy in Rwanda that
stops a poor man from staying
absolutely
with the rich?
Yes, not these things of fallacy. This is academic work. We are speaking facts.
So still about the illusion. So actually when you are to look at Rwanda, you go away from Kigali, you find that actually poverty rates are quite worse in Rwanda. So especially in rural areas, of Rwanda where majority of the population lives. Yeah, Rwanda is quite a small country at a population of around 12 million people. So if you read to compare, so Rwanda actually is one of the most densely populated countries in the whole of Africa. In the whole of Africa. In the world. Yeah, so it's quite densely populated. So with that context, actually, you might find there's some icing on the cake. The few days I was in Kigali, it gave me an impression that probably Kigali is one of the places where you're happy to pay your taxes. Because you see the government, in Kigali, the government, doing some bits of, social services, the roads. I didn't see dust in Kigali when I was there like the one we experienced here in Kampala. So back to public service delivery, it has blossomed in Rwanda. So you find that actually just before genocide, the access to energy, hydroelectric power was around 1%, and to date it has nearly gone up to over 50%. So that is progress. And if you look at parliamentary representation, so Rwanda has one of the highest, female representation in parliament at around 2/3 of the parliamentarians. So their president Kagame actually aims to make Rwanda the Singapore of Africa. And they've got different visions, Vision 2020 and the others. And of late you find that even assembling cars like Volkswagens in Rwanda. And still under our discussion, is it success story or is it an illusion? If you look at the ease of doing business globally, Rwanda has jumped from around 143 spaces in the whole world to around 29 in 2018. And they're actually moving more spaces. So there are some of the success stories we are seeing in Rwanda. So whilst I was there as well in Kigali, I felt there's a sense of safety, and in Kigali security as well, if you had to base it with other cities around Africa. There was tranquility, you could feel the security in this land of 1,000 hills, which is famous with their gorillas. So however, all those developments and context, so there is a shadow of an authoritarian system in governance, which is concentrated around the personality of their president Kagame. And like the previous speaker said, is the president of Rwanda working for the aspirations of Africa, or are they working for the aspirations of the imperialists? So as Pan-Africans, we need to query this. There is evidence that Rwanda has made excursions into the Congo, DRC, and probably in the future we might even have DRC split into countries. So that goes against the tenets of the aspirations of Pan-African unity. Currently, actually, Rwanda is one of the biggest exporters of gold in Africa. But most of the mines are DRC, so we need to query as Pan-Africans, where is this gold coming from?
Where does it get this gold?
Yes, where does it come from? They even have one of the biggest actually gold refineries
Rwanda.
in Africa. Yes.
But Rwanda has no gold.
Yeah, they have no gold. So where are they getting
So
it
it
from?
means Rwanda is supporting the wars to continue in Congo.
Yes, probably. And
Well,
this is against the aspirations of Pan-Africanism. And like Kwame Nkrumah said, it is in our hands to join our strength, taking sustenance from our diversity, honoring our rich and varied traditions and culture, but acting together for the protection and benefit of us all. So taking us back to our debate, is this a success story or is it an illusion? I would say it is an illusion.
It's all about a cynical crazy. And there are so many reasons why genocide always takes place. This man talked about different causes. But sometimes these causes he has talked about do not apply in Africa. Now, when it comes to Rwanda, about the genocide after 30 years, I don't see any success.
Is it a success or an
It
illusion?
is not a success.
Somebody has put a curtain in our eyes.
It is an illusion.
When you
Why?
when you are watching the Premier League, you see Arsenal putting on visit Rwanda. Okay, when we visit, what is there?
Yeah, it is not a success because Kagame went to Rwanda, captured Rwanda on personal means. It was for personal gains. And then, yes,
there was a genocide, and the man
it was revenge,
and
depending according to the history of how they were chased from Rwanda. Therefore, because of this intertribal, cynical conflicts, then we saw these guys going back. When they came to Rwanda, they managed to rule
but they
Rwanda.
gave you microphone 3 times. I thought you have finished your argument.
A big man is argumentative, and sometimes these things are researched. So always when somebody tells you the fact, you should know that somebody has made a research, because you can't just come on air
You're
and
going
just
to be
do something
diverted.
that you don't have an evidence.
Mr. Lecturer, don't be diverted by the comment.
Yes.
You make your
So,
presentation.
which means I see a next genocide after the regime of Kagame, because these people who have been oppressed because of the strictures and constitution, because Kagame came as a revolutionist. And when we come to what we call a revolutionary party, this is a party that captures power or comes into power with the help of the army. And once they reach there,
they use force.
They use army. It is a political party that is backed by the army. And always when they reach in power, they try to spend all the constitutional measures, and then they use the state machines to establish themselves into power for a long time. Me, I'm sensing another genocide which is being caused by Kagame himself. Why? It is because there is oppression, there is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom of movement, there is no democracy at all. Therefore, because of that kind of grievances, most of the Rwandese are in Congo, as Mr. Professor said. Then when they are Congo, remember this gentleman is supporting the Tutsi, that is the M23, to come and capture, maybe to terrorize Congo in the form of exploiting the gold that we have had. But which means the Congo in revenge or in trying to punish Rwanda, they are also recruiting the Tutsi. Which means at the end of the Kagame's regime, the so-called historicals, when these historicals are over after 40 years, there is another generational genocide that is sensing after the Kagame's regime. I saw.
Lesaffre, Thomas Mutatina, it's always a pleasure, by the way, having you here. And of course, tussling it out every other day, every other Friday. I love that. Thank you so much, Comrade Professor Judge William Alenyo. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being part of this debate. Follow this debate for Saturday from 4 to 5. My name is Andrew Irumbe Katusabe, your speaker. This is free entry every Friday at Fairway Hotel here, and we are always glad to receive you. I say now.
Free your mind.